My father rose during my wedding reception, fixed the knot of his tie, and placed an invoice in front of me. Not a card. Not a speech he had scribbled because sentiment had briefly ambushed him. An invoice, printed on Parker Supply letterhead, the same stock he used for contractors buying nails, hinges, and paint thinner. He carried it to the head table with the calm pride of a man delivering justice, set it between my champagne glass and the lemon cake, and said, "Natalie, it's time to settle your account." 126 guests went silent. My husband's hand found mine beneath the table. I looked at the total, $228,750. The cost of raising me, itemized and payable now that I was established. What my parents did not know was that I had brought paperwork, too. My name is Natalie Parker. I was 34 years old when my parents tried to turn my wedding into a public collections hearing. But that night did not come from nowhere. It started long before the reception, long before the dress, long before Ethan Lawson stood beside me and promised never to keep score. It started on Christmas morning in 2003. I was 11. Most children tear paper, scream, grab, and move on with the sacred attention span of caffeinated raccoons. I did not. In our house, gifts were audited. My father sat in his brown recliner with a calculator balanced on one knee and a yellow pad on the other. As my sister Lauren and I opened each present, he announced the price. Dollhouse, $47. Sketch kit, $21. Used mountain bike, $96. When the wrapping paper was gone, he added the column twice, tapped the calculator like it had personally offended him, and declared, $318 for Christmas. My mother, Angela, nodded as if he had reported the temperature. Lauren was 8. She looked confused, then went back to the dollhouse. I understood enough. The bike was not a gift. It was a debt wearing a bow. That was the first year I stopped asking for things. The next summer I wanted to attend music camp. Clarinet. I had borrowed a school instrument and practiced until my mouth hurt. My father taped the brochure to the refrigerator with the price circled in red. $570 we won't get back, he said. He let me go, but the brochure stayed on the fridge for nearly 18 months. The paper curled. The ink faded. The number stayed sharp. My mother kept a green spiral notebook in the bottom kitchen drawer. I found it when I was searching for tape. Each section had a name on top. Natalie. Lauren, under each name were dates, amounts, and categories. Shoes, lunch fees, doctor, birthday, cold medicine, everything we cost them written down like inventory. I put the notebook back because I thought every family worked this way. I thought love came with documentation. Once, when I was 13, I asked my mother why she wrote everything down. She was peeling potatoes at the sink and did not stop. "So your father knows where the money goes," she said. "But we're your kids." She gave me a look that was almost pity. Kids are where most of the money goes. That sentence lived in me for years. Not because it was clever, it was not. It was small and practical and sad, but it explained the air in our house. Birthdays were not celebrations, they were budget events. School trips were not opportunities, they were negotiations. When a permission slip came home, my father did not ask whether I wanted to go. He asked what the deposit was, when the balance was due, and whether anyone had considered the cost of gas. By high school, I had a system. I asked for nothing until I could present 3 reasons it was necessary, 2 cheaper alternatives, and 1 way I would offset the cost. Other kids learned debate from clubs. I learned it from needing sneakers. We lived in Briar Falls, Indiana, a town small enough for strangers to know your cousin's divorce before you did. My father, Richard Parker, owned Parker Supply on Cedar Avenue. His father, Walter Parker, had opened it in 1969. The store had warped floors, a brass bell over the door, and aisles that smelled like sawdust and old rain. Walter had raised 4 sons and a daughter on that store's income, and according to family legend, nobody had ever suffered as much as Walter. His favorite saying was, "Nothing is free, especially blood." Charming family slogan. Put it on a mug and terrify house guests. Richard was the youngest and the only one who stayed. Staying meant he inherited the store. It also meant he inherited Walter's belief that children were expenses with faces. He married Angela when they were both 20. She was pregnant with me. She had been studying early childhood education at a community college, which later felt like a cruel joke written by a tired universe. She dropped out after the wedding and never returned. They bought a 3-bedroom ranch on Juniper Lane, 5 blocks from the store, with blue shutters, a sagging chain-link fence, and a garage full of unsold plumbing parts. That was my childhood, a house where generosity was treated like a bookkeeping error. My father did not tuck us in. He calculated. My mother, who might have been softer in another life, became his assistant accountant, not for Parker Supply. For us. The summer before my senior year, my father called a family meeting. In our house, that meant someone needed money or someone was about to be blamed for money. Usually both, because efficiency matters even in emotional ruin. He sat at the kitchen table with a tan folder. Inside was a typed page on Parker Supply letterhead. He called it a family contribution agreement. I read it twice. The wording was clunky, but the meaning was not. It said Richard and Angela Parker had devoted substantial financial resources to raising Natalie Grace Parker, and that once financially independent, I would make good faith efforts to repay the family contribution. There were 2 signature lines. One for him, one for me. It's symbolic, he said, just so everyone understands the arrangement. My mother stood at the sink drying the same plate for so long it should have filed a complaint. She did not look at me. I was 17. I had a scholarship, but there was a gap for housing and fees. My parents had offered to help with part of it, maybe $2,300. Refusing meant losing even that. I knew the document would not matter in court. A teenager signing vague repayment language under pressure is not exactly the legal triumph my father imagined. But fighting in that house had a price, too, and I had learned early to choose the cheaper loss. I signed. What I remember most is Lauren watching from the hallway. She was 14, half hidden behind the doorframe. She did not look worried for me. She looked like she was learning the system. I went to Lakeview State University on tuition scholarship. Room, food, books, and survival were mine to solve. I worked mornings at a campus cafe from 5 to 9. 3 nights a week I handled filing and invoices for a small medical billing office. My apartment froze in winter, boiled in summer, and had one window that never properly closed. I studied in the library because the library had heat and chairs that did not threaten structural collapse. During college, my parents did not visit campus. Not for move-in, not for awards, not when I worked 29 hours a week during tax season and still made the dean's list. My mother mailed one care package my sophomore year. It contained instant soup, 3 pairs of socks, and a note from my father that said, "Use these wisely." I laughed when I read it because the alternative was crying over powdered broth, and that seemed like giving the soup too much power. The first semester bill that my parents helped with became a family story almost immediately. At Christmas, my father told relatives, "We helped Natalie get through school," as if he had personally carried me across 4 years on his back. He never mentioned the scholarship. He never mentioned the cafe job or the billing office. He never mentioned the loans I refused because I was terrified of owing anyone anything. In his version, I was a project he had funded. In mine, I was a person who had escaped by spreadsheet. I graduated with a 3.74 GPA and passed the CPA exam on my first attempt. My father's response came by phone while he was unpacking paint rollers at the store. "Looks like our investment finally produced something." No congratulations. No pride. Just return analysis. My first real job was with an accounting firm in Brookhaven. Salary, $61,500, not luxury money, breathing money, rent paid on time money. Buy groceries without turning each aisle into a moral trial money. 4 months in, my father called. The delivery van needed a transmission. Could I help? I sent $650 that afternoon. He was my dad. The van was how he kept the store running. That was August 2018. By October, the store needed a new water heater. In December, Lauren needed money for certification classes. In February, the county tax bill was short. I sent money every time. Bank transfer, no conditions, no lecture. I still believed help could be given without becoming a weapon. Adorable, really. My optimism deserved a helmet. After the second year, I made a spreadsheet. Not because I planned a confrontation. Because I am a CPA, and when numbers move, I track them. The file was named Family Support. Columns, date, amount, purpose, payment method, running total. At the time, I thought I was organizing records. I did not realize I was collecting evidence. The monthly help started small, 400 here, 600 there. Then it became predictable, almost scheduled. My father would call near the 25th. My mother would call if he wanted the request to sound softer. Lauren called when the money was for her, though she always phrased it like the family had voted and I had missed the meeting. Dad says we're short. Mom says the card payment is due. The store account is tight. Nobody said please. Please would have admitted there was a choice. In year 3, my father called about the store roof. $13,700. He did not ask so much as announce the weather. Contractor says we can't wait until winter, he said. You know I don't have that kind of cash sitting around. I moved money from my savings that Friday. He said, that's what family is for. He did not say thank you. Year 4, Lauren's car died outside Mill Creek on her way to the store. She worked there part-time, mostly cash, roughly 22 hours a week. My mother called and said Lauren needed safe transportation. I sent $4,250 for a used sedan. Year 5, my father needed shoulder surgery and 6 weeks of recovery. Insurance covered some. Deductibles and copays did the little dance they do when American medicine wants to remind you it was designed by accountants raised by wolves. I paid $8,950 in 2 transfers. Year 6 was the renovation. Parker Supply needed new shelving, fresh flooring, updated electrical, and a redesigned counter. Total, $24,600. I drained half my emergency fund and sat in my Brookhaven apartment staring at the balance, wondering what would happen if my own car failed or I lost my job. That night I added a column to the spreadsheet, acknowledged. I went back through every transfer. Had my father confirmed receiving it? Had my mother thanked me? Had Lauren said anything? I typed the answer row by row. No. Number 52 transfers over 6 years. Not one thank you. Not one we got it. Not one sentence that treated the money as help instead of tribute. Thanksgiving of year 7, I drove to Briar Falls because families have rituals, and apparently one of ours was pretending the house did not smell like turkey and resentment. I brought a pecan tart from a bakery near my office. It sat on the passenger seat for 2 hours while I rehearsed being calm. I arrived and heard Lauren in the kitchen before she saw me. She got the degree. She got the job. She left. The least she can do is pay some of it back. I stopped in the hallway with my coat still on, keys cutting into my palm. She was not wrong about the sequence. I had left. I had a job. I had built something. But the least she can do changed every dollar I had sent from generosity into duty. It made my life sound like an unpaid invoice. At dinner, my mother opened with, "Must be nice to go out all the time." I had posted one picture of noodles with a coworker. $16 with tip. A financial scandal, clearly. Alert the Senate. My father waited until pie. That agreement you signed still exists, he said casually. I drove back to Brookhaven in the dark, no music, both hands on the wheel. When I got home, I opened the spreadsheet and added another column, what they think I owe. Then I started entering what I remembered from my mother's green notebook. Not every line. Enough. I had 2 ledgers now, what they believed I cost and what I had actually paid. I met Ethan Lawson at a Labor Day cookout in a suburb north of Brookhaven. My coworker dragged me there because apparently friendship means forcing introverts toward potato salad. Ethan was near the grill arguing with a man twice his age about whether ribs needed sauce. He was losing with such cheerful dignity that I liked him before he knew I existed. He was 33, a civil engineer who worked on bridges and rail structures. He built things meant to carry weight. The metaphor was obnoxiously obvious, but life has no respect for subtlety. His parents, Martin and Patricia Lawson, lived in Grayfield, about 40 minutes away. Martin had retired from the Postal Service. Patricia had taught 5th grade for 31 years. The first time I ate dinner at their house, Patricia hugged me at the door and said, "I made too much pasta bake, so you are legally required to take leftovers." Nobody mentioned the grocery bill. Nobody listed ingredients. Nobody slid a receipt beside my plate. I nearly cried into the salad. Ethan proposed the following November on the back steps of our apartment building, after a rainstorm, with a simple ring and no audience. He got halfway through the question before I said yes. We paid for the wedding ourselves. $31,400 for the Riverbend Hall in Briar Falls, food, flowers, a DJ, photography, and enough sparkling wine to carry several generations of unresolved issues. My parents wanted control of the guest list. "Our side deserves a proper share," my father said. "You are not paying for the wedding," I answered. He called Ethan directly. "You're getting a good deal," he told my future husband. "We poured a lot into that girl." Ethan told me about the call that night. He looked disturbed. I was not surprised. I had heard that language my entire life: investment, return, cost, value, depreciation. My father talked about me like a product that had finally reached market. 2 months before the wedding, my Aunt Susan Bennett called. She was my father's older sister, the one who had left Briar Falls decades earlier, married an orthodontist, and moved to Fairmont. We spoke on holidays and birthdays, not much more. She congratulated me, then said, "Your dad says the store has been difficult lately. He mentioned you haven't really been in a position to help, but I'm glad your career is going well." I stared at the phone. "He said I haven't helped." "Well, you know Richard," she said. "He worries. He said you've been distant." I thanked her and hung up. Then I called my cousin Emily Foster in Northbridge. Same story. My father had told her I was successful but had not contributed much to the family. He had painted me as the daughter who escaped and forgot the people who raised her. I sat in my apartment, furnished with discount store shelves and second-hand tables, because I had been sending roughly a quarter of my income home for years, and finally saw the whole shape of it. My parents were not only taking my money, they were editing the story. To the extended family, they were struggling parents abandoned by an ambitious daughter. I was the ungrateful one. They were the martyrs. And I had been too busy paying their bills to notice the public relations campaign. By the time Susan called, I had become excellent at living 2 lives. At work, I was the careful, reliable manager who could find a missing decimal in a stack of statements. At home, I was the daughter who answered the phone with her shoulders already tight. I had a good apartment, but the couch was second-hand. I had a decent salary, but I still hesitated before buying a winter coat. I could explain a corporate audit to a room full of executives, yet I could not explain to my own father why thank you mattered. That was the part that embarrassed me most. Not the money, the silence around it. The fact that I had trained myself to treat being used as normal because at least they were still calling. I opened my spreadsheet and added a notes column. Every call, every remark, every relative who had heard the same version. Dates, names, exact wording where I could remember it. Then, because habit is a parasite with a calendar, I paid another $3,900 toward my father's business liability premium. 1 week before the wedding, I drove to Briar Falls alone. Ethan would arrive 2 days later with his parents. I booked a room at the Willow Creek Motor Inn near the west exit. My mother was offended. "We have a guest room," she said. "I washed the sheets." "I need quiet for last-minute planning," I told her. It was personal. I could not sleep under that roof and remain normal, and I had already given normal an unfair amount of assistance. The week was tense in the specific way small-town family events become tense. Politely, constantly, and with casseroles nearby. Angela had opinions about the centerpieces, the seating chart, the aisle music, the program font, and the minister Ethan and I had chosen. She wanted to supervise something she had not funded. My father, meanwhile, was cheerful. That was the warning sign. Richard Parker was not a cheerful man. He was reliable, grim, and shaped by decades of arguing with contractors about screw sizes. But that week he smiled too easily. He hummed at the store. He tapped his jacket pocket. Something was coming. On Wednesday, I stopped by Parker Supply to drop off printed programs. Lauren was behind the counter. Beside the register lay a crumpled receipt from Corner Copy. "Big print job?" I asked. She pushed the receipt into a drawer. "Not your business." Thursday afternoon, Ethan's parents arrived. Patricia brought 4 dozen oatmeal cookies in a metal tin shaped like a farmhouse. She hugged me in the motel lobby and said, "We are so happy to get you officially." Martin shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug anyway. "Welcome in, kid." 2 families, 2 methods. One brought cookies. The other apparently visited a copy shop. The rehearsal dinner was at Miller's Pit House, a barbecue place on County Road 8 with picnic tables and paper towel rolls instead of napkins. Ethan chose it, and I loved him for that. 43 people came, wedding party, close family, a few friends. The brisket was excellent. The beans were better. Martin stood first. He held a glass of iced tea in one hand and a folded napkin in the other. "Ethan," he said, "you found someone smarter than you." "Natalie, you found someone stubborn enough to keep up. That seems fair." People laughed. Patricia dabbed her eyes. It was simple, warm, and over before anyone needed rescue. Then my father stood. The room changed, not loudly, more like pressure dropping before a storm. Richard buttoned his jacket and cleared his throat. "Raising Natalie was the largest investment Angela and I ever made." The word hit the room hard. Investment. Not joy, not blessing, not privilege, investment. He continued. "Some investments take a long time to mature. You put in the work, you carry the burden, and one day, if you're lucky, you see a return." He looked at my mother, then at me. "When that day comes, well, it's fair to settle accounts." He smiled. My mother smiled. Lauren lifted her glass. Some people chuckled because people chuckle when they are unsure whether a man is joking or merely socially dangerous. Aunt Susan frowned. Patricia's smile froze. Outside afterward, Ethan took my hand. Was that supposed to be funny? I thought about the receipt, the jacket pocket, the green notebook, the agreement I signed at 17. "No," I said, "I don't think it was." That night the motel lobby was almost empty. A soda machine buzzed near the vending alcove. Lauren sat on a fake leather couch beside the elevator, arms crossed, boots planted, waiting. I knew she was waiting for me. "Natalie," she said. It sounded rehearsed. I set my ice bucket on the counter. "What?" "Mom and Dad are doing something at the reception." "What kind of something?" "A statement about making things even." She looked at the elevator doors instead of me. "There's an envelope, it's itemized." That word sat between us. Itemized, not emotional, not symbolic, itemized. "Are you warning me?" I asked. "Preparing you." She stood and smoothed her jacket. "I'm not on your side, don't misunderstand that. I'm just not cruel enough to let you be surprised." She walked toward the stairwell, then stopped with one hand on the door. "You always get out of things, Natalie. You'll get out of this, too." Then she left. I stood there holding a plastic bucket while the soda machine hummed like it was minding its business better than any relative I had. My parents had printed something. They had planned the timing. My wedding reception was going to be an ambush. The only remaining question was whether I would walk into it unarmed. The night before the ceremony, I also thought about canceling the whole reception. Not the marriage. Never that. Ethan and I could have gone to the courthouse at sunrise, signed papers, and eaten pancakes in our wedding clothes. A clean exit has its charm. But then my mind went to Patricia's cookies, Martin's toast, Claire's dress hanging from the closet door, Ethan's niece practicing her flower toss with the seriousness of a tiny Olympic athlete. I had not built this day for my father to ruin it. If he wanted to bring paperwork into a room full of witnesses, then paperwork would answer him in the same room. Ethan fell asleep before 11:30. He slept on his back with one arm hanging off the bed, peaceful as a man whose family had not formed an invoice committee. I sat beside him in the blue light of my laptop and considered my choices. I could drive to my parents' house, tell them I knew, and threaten to cut them off if they tried it. but that would only give them time to adapt. They would find another place, another speech, another trap. I could ignore it. Let my father hand me the envelope, smile, and say we would discuss it later. But in front of 126 guests, silence would look like agreement. The room would believe I owed them, or I could prepare. That was the accountant's answer. Dreadfully practical, almost insulting in its usefulness. I opened the spreadsheet. I added the newest payments. Liability premium, store furnace, Lauren's medical bill, a shortfall on the building tax. I checked every number against bank statements. Dates, amounts, purpose, method. My hands stayed steady. They always do around numbers. Numbers do not perform ambushes. Numbers just stand there and tell on everyone. I checked the formula 3 times. Then I opened the bank portal and downloaded statements in case anyone accused me of inventing numbers. There is a special kind of insult in preparing proof that you helped people who already know you helped them. Still, I did it. I highlighted transfer descriptions where I had written store, tax, Lauren car, medical, and monthly support. I did not need legal language, I needed clarity. The summary page was not angry. That mattered. Anger would have given my father something to attack. Facts are less generous. They sit there, smug little bricks, refusing to be moved. At 12:36 a.m., I finally scrolled to the bottom. I had never done that before. I entered transfers, reconciled them, and moved on. I had never looked at the total because some part of me did not want the answer. There it was, bolded in the formula cell. $256,910. I blinked and read it again. $256,910. 8 years of support. 8 years of just this once. 8 years of emergencies that always seemed to know my payday. My parents were planning to hand me a bill for $228,750. I had already paid more than that. At 2:11 a.m., I went downstairs in plaid pajama pants, a gray university sweatshirt, and motel slippers. The night clerk barely looked up. The business nook was a cramped room beside the laundry with an ancient desktop and a printer that coughed before every page, like even the machine had moral objections. I plugged in my drive and printed the spreadsheet. Every transfer, every date, every amount, every purpose. Then I created a summary page, yearly totals, large payments, cumulative total. No insults, no commentary, just clean accounting. Finally, I made a cover sheet. Invoice services rendered to Richard and Angela Parker, August 2018 to May 2026, prepared by Natalie Parker. CPA. I printed 11 pages total. I stapled them, slid them into a plain white envelope from the front desk, sealed it, and held it in both hands. It weighed almost nothing. A few ounces of paper and toner. Yet it held 8 years of money my family had accepted without gratitude and then erased from the story. I hoped I would not need it. I really did. Some foolish part of me still hoped my father would give a toast, sit down, and let my wedding be a wedding. I fell asleep at 3:24 a.m. with the envelope on the nightstand beside my rings. The wedding morning was in late May, the kind of Indiana day that starts gray and turns bright as if the sky has decided to cooperate for once. I showered, ate 3 bites of a muffin, and went to Claire Whitman's room for hair and makeup. Claire was my maid of honor. We had met during freshman orientation. She once shared a textbook with me for an entire semester because I could not afford my own. She never asked why I sent money home every month, but she always noticed when I went quiet afterward. She saw the envelope in my bag. "What's that?" "Insurance." She studied my face, then nodded. Claire was an emergency room nurse. She read people fast. I put on my dress. Ivory, off the shoulder, simple, $1,950. I had paid for it myself. Somewhere in my parents' mental ledger that probably counted as proof I could afford their demand. In the mirror I saw the girl who stopped asking for Christmas gifts, the teenager who signed a fake agreement because resistance was too expensive, the daughter who kept paying because she mistook duty for love. Then I handed Claire the envelope. "If I ask for this during the reception, give it to me. No questions." "No questions," she said, and tucked it into her clutch. The ceremony was at St. Mark's Chapel, a white wooden church built in the 1890s with stained glass that threw colored light across the pews. Ethan's niece, 4 years old and deeply committed to chaos, launched flower petals down the aisle like tiny confetti grenades. Then it was my turn. My father took my arm at the back of the church. For one brief moment, I let myself feel what I had wanted for years. His hand was firm. His suit was stiff. He stood taller as the music began. For 30 seconds, he looked like a proud father and not a man carrying an invoice in his jacket. I could feel the envelope there anyway. Ethan stood at the altar with wet eyes and a crooked tie. His vows were short. I promise to love you without conditions. I promise not to keep score. A few people laughed softly. I did not. I knew exactly what those words meant. My vows answered his. I promise to love you freely. I promise that what we build will never come with a bill. My mother dabbed at her eyes. My father checked his watch. We kissed. People clapped. Outside, the photographer arranged family pictures. My father smiled for the camera, then touched his jacket pocket again. Riverbend Hall looked beautiful. White linens, candles in glass jars, string lights across the ceiling, green garlands along the windows. The room seemed soft and golden, which was rude of it, given what was hiding in my father's coat. After dinner came the toasts. During dinner, I watched my parents' table without making it obvious. My mother barely ate. She cut her chicken into pieces so small they looked like evidence. Lauren whispered to her twice and glanced at me after each whisper. My father accepted congratulations from store customers with the stiff smile of a man waiting for his cue. Ethan noticed too. He leaned close while pretending to adjust my veil, which I had already taken off. Still expecting something? Yes. Do you want me to stop him? No, I said. If he starts it, I finish it. Ethan nodded once. That was one of the reasons I married him. He wanted to protect me, but he understood that taking over would only turn me into another object in someone else's argument. Brandon Reed, Ethan's best man, told a story about Ethan building a dorm room bookshelf upside down and refusing to admit it until every shelf leaned like a tired drunk. The room laughed hard enough to shake glasses. Claire stood next. She did not tell a joke. She talked about the night my father had shoulder surgery. I had called her not because of the money, but because no one told me he was out of surgery. I had learned it from my mother 2 days later. Natalie gives, Claire said. She gives quietly. She gives until nobody notices she is doing it. And she never asks anyone to sign for delivery. My father shifted in his chair. Then Martin Lawson stood even though he was not on the schedule, because Martin treated schedules as polite suggestions. Natalie, he said, lifting his glass, welcome home. That was all. Patricia cried. Ethan cried. I almost did, but I still needed my face arranged correctly for whatever came next. At my parents' table, Angela rearranged forks. Lauren checked her phone. My father sat with one hand pressed over the outside of his jacket pocket. It happened after the cake and before the bouquet toss. The DJ had finished a set and guests were wandering back to tables with drinks. My father stood. He did not hurry. Richard Parker believed slowness made him look authoritative. He buttoned his jacket, picked up a spoon, and tapped his water glass 3 times. Ting, 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 the room turned. If I could have everyone's attention, he said, his store voice, clear, carrying, built for aisles and stubborn customers. I'd like to say a few words about my daughter. He began warmly. He always did. That was the sugar around the blade. Angela and I are proud of Natalie, the education, the career, the life she has made. He paused. But people rarely talk about what it costs to get a child there. The room tightened. Raising a child is sacrifice. We put in years of labor, money, and worry. And now that Natalie is married and stable, we believe it is time to acknowledge that investment. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. He walked toward the head table. We prepared a family accounting, he said. A record of what it cost to raise you, Natalie. It's time we settled up. He laid the envelope in front of me. The room went silent. I looked at Ethan. His jaw was clenched, his hands flat on the table. I've got it, I said softly. I opened the envelope like a tax packet. Because if someone hands you paperwork at your wedding, the least you can do is ruin their theater by being professional. Inside was one sheet on Parker Supply letterhead. Across the top, bold and centered, Invoice, cost of raising Natalie Grace Parker, 1992-2010. Below were line items. Hospital and delivery, $11,850. Baby supplies and formula, $7,900. Clothing through age 18, $22,500. Food, $49,200. Housing share, $51,000. Utilities share, $19,800. Medical coverage, $31,500. School fees and supplies, $13,900. Family trips, $10,600. Miscellaneous expenses, $10,500. At the bottom, underlined, total due, $228,750 payable now that you are married and financially established. Someone had formatted it carefully. Someone had chosen the categories. Someone had checked the math, if not the humanity. I read it twice while 126 people watched me breathe. My father stood at the end of the table with his arms folded, waiting for tears, shame, surrender, something useful to him. My mother sat upright, hands folded, face arranged into solemn dignity. It looked rehearsed. Lauren smiled slightly, proud of the architecture. I set the invoice flat on the table and smoothed it with my palm. $228,750, I said. The cost of raising me due now. Whispers began at the edges of the room. Patricia covered her mouth. Martin put a hand on her shoulder. Ethan started to rise, and I pressed my hand against his knee. He sat back down. Aunt Susan stared at my father as if she had finally located the rotten beam holding up the family house. Her expression moved from confusion to understanding to disgust. I looked at the invoice again. Let's review it, my father blinked. He had expected a scene. He had not expected an audit. Hospital and delivery, I said. You listed $11,850. At the time, you were on Grandpa Walter's group plan through the store association. Based on average out-of-pocket costs in this county, that figure is inflated by at least half. My father's arms loosened. Clothing through age 18, $22,500. I wore Lauren's hand-me-downs until I was 14. After that, I paid for most of my own clothes with babysitting money and weekend work. A realistic number is closer to $6,800. The room had gone still again, but now it was a different stillness. People were no longer embarrassed for me. They were listening. Food, $49,200. I cooked family dinners starting at 13. Also, I was on the reduced-price lunch program for several years, which means the household qualified for assistance. Your number does not reflect that. My mother looked down at the table. Medical coverage, $31,500. After Grandpa's plan ended, you had a subsidized plan. Adding me was nowhere near the amount listed. My father's jaw moved, but no words came out. Family trips, $10,600. We took 1 week at Lake Carver, 2 weekend motel trips, and 3-day trips to an amusement park. I would be generous at $4,200. I folded my hands. But that is not the main issue. I turned to Claire. The envelope, please. Claire reached into her clutch and handed me the white envelope without hesitation. Smooth. Calm, beautifully competent. Nurses and accountants should run the world, frankly, but then who would make terrible speeches at weddings? My father's face changed. Confidence drained first. Then confusion. Then fear. My mother leaned forward. What is that? I opened the envelope and removed the stapled pages. I held up the cover sheet. Invoice services rendered to Richard and Angela Parker, August 2018 to May 2026, prepared by Natalie Parker, CPA. I let the room read it. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds for everyone to understand that my father had chosen a public accounting, and I had brought one with receipts. I placed my packet beside his and squared the edges of both pages. Since we are presenting invoices, I said, the room deserves both. I did not speak to my parents anymore. I spoke to the audience because my father had made the audience part of it. For 8 years, I have sent money to my parents. Monthly transfers. No loan documents, no repayment terms, no interest, no demands, just help. I turned the first page. 91 monthly transfers, most requested by phone, some by my mother, a few through Lauren. I turned one page so the front row could see the table of transfers. I had blacked out account numbers because even in the middle of public family warfare, data privacy deserves a chair at the table. The amounts remained visible. The dates remained visible. The purposes remained visible. I did not mention every small transfer. I skipped the $380 for my mother's dental bill, the $220 for Lauren's licensing exam, the $790 for the store freezer, the $1,100 temporary loan that never became temporary in any direction. Not because they did not matter, because the large numbers were enough, and because mercy, unlike invoices, does not need itemization. I listed the major payments. Lauren finally looked up when I said her name. For a second, she looked furious. Then the anger wavered. I do not know what she expected. Maybe she thought I would protect her even while she helped hand me the bill. Maybe she believed family meant I would absorb the humiliation and leave her out of the accounting. That was another ugly lesson from our house. The person who pays is expected to keep everyone else comfortable. Store roof, $13,700. Lauren's replacement car, $4,250. My father's shoulder surgery, $8,950. Store renovation, $24,600. Business liability premium, $3,900. Furnace replacement, $3,450. Lauren's credit card payoff, $5,850. Building tax shortfall, $7,600. Aunt Susan gripped the edge of her table. Some of you were told I did not help much, I said. Some of you were told I left and forgot my family. I know because I heard the same story from more than one person. Susan's eyes filled. She looked at my father. He did not look back. That version made my parents look abandoned. This one includes the bank records. I tapped the stack. I kept records because that is my job. I verify claims. I document transactions. I compare statements with evidence. The room belonged to the truth now, not to his performance. Later, people told me the strangest part was my voice. Not the numbers, not my father's face. My voice. I sounded like I was leading a quarterly review. That made sense to me. If I had let myself feel everything in that moment, I would have fallen apart. So I gave the room the version of me that knew columns, totals, and supporting documents. She had gotten me this far. She could carry me 10 more minutes. I picked up the summary page. Year 1, August 2018 through July 2019, $13,950. That was 26% of my take-home pay. No one spoke. Year 2, $19,700. Year 3, $28,450. That was the roof year. Year 4, $32,100. Year 5, $31,860. Year 6, $44,200. That was the renovation year when I emptied most of my emergency fund. Patricia cried silently. Martin held her hand. Year 7, $34,900. Year 8, January through May, $17,750. I set the page down. Monthly transfers total, $174,860. Emergency payments total, $82,050. I looked up. Grand total, $256,910. The silence had weight. Then came small gasps, one after another, scattered across the hall. I lifted my father's invoice and set it beside mine. Your invoice says I owe you $228,750 for raising me. I touched my own packet. My records show I have already paid you $256,910. My father's face went pale, then red, then pale again, as if his circulation was trying to vote. I continued. Using your logic, you owe me $28,160. Someone near the back whispered, "Good Lord." I did not smile. "But I am not collecting," I said, "because I did not send that money as a transaction. I sent it because you needed help. Because you are my parents, because that is what family should mean." I looked at my father. "You saw raising me as a cost, I saw helping you as a choice." 3 seconds passed, then Richard Parker erupted. "We gave you everything." His voice cracked across the room. He slammed his hand onto the nearest table and silverware jumped. "We fed you, housed you, clothed you, paid for you from the day you were born." I stayed seated. My voice stayed level. "You raised a child, that is what parents do. Do not lecture me." He hit the table again. This time a plate slid off and shattered. Lauren flinched. My mother stared at the linen like it might open and swallow her. "Don't sit there in your expensive dress with your degree and tell me what parents do," he said. I looked at him. "Your father taught you children were bills. I know, you told me that when I was 12. That stopped him. His hand stayed half raised. His face was red, but something moved behind his eyes, not softness. Recognition, maybe, the terrible kind. Patricia Lawson stood. She was short, gray-haired, and had spent 3 decades controlling classrooms full of children with less drama than the grown man in front of her. "Richard," she said, "you are the one who made this about money." My mother stood. Her chair scraped loudly. She leaned toward my father and whispered, but I was close enough to hear. "I just wanted her to still need us." Then she walked toward the exit. My father followed. Lauren grabbed her purse and went after them. The door closed. For a moment, nobody moved. I sat there, breathing. Ethan's hand found mine under the table. I squeezed back, then stood. I smoothed my dress because apparently when my life catches fire, I become very concerned with fabric alignment. I looked at the room. "I think we are finished with speeches." A few people laughed, shaky and relieved. I turned to the DJ, who had been frozen behind his laptop for 10 minutes, mouth slightly open. "Play something good." He blinked, then grinned. "Absolutely." A bright old disco track burst through the speakers. Claire clapped once, loud as a starting pistol. Brandon whistled. Patricia wiped her face with a napkin and stepped toward the dance floor. Then the room moved. People stood. People clapped. People danced because the storm had passed, and music gave them permission to behave like the night was still alive. Ethan pulled me to the center of the floor. We laughed and cried at the same time, and neither of us tried to stop. The reception continued for almost 3 hours. People came up quietly, one by one. A coworker said, "I had no idea." One of my father's longtime customers, a woman who used to buy garden supplies from him every spring, touched my arm and said, "He always joked that you owed him. I didn't know he meant it." Aunt Susan found me near the bar. Her mascara had surrendered completely. "Richard told me you never helped," she said. "He said you were too busy with your career. I believed him, Natalie. I am so sorry." "He told you a story," I said. "Tonight you heard the rest." Near midnight, Ethan and I sat outside on the hall steps while the DJ packed up. The air smelled like cut grass and damp pavement. "I'm sorry about them," Ethan said. "I'm sorry you had to see it." He put his arm around me. "I married you because of who you are. Now I know what it cost you to become her." A week later, the calls began. Not from my parents, from everyone else. Cousins, family, friends, people from the church. The story my parents had built collapsed in one evening and the pieces landed where they belonged. Lauren texted Tuesday, "You humiliated them." I read it, set the phone down, and returned to work. Some accusations arrive already wearing their own answer. My mother called Thursday. "You could have just said no," she said. Her voice was thin from crying. "You could have taken us aside. You could have not handed me a bill at my wedding." She was silent, then she hung up. My father emailed Friday, "We expected better. Your mother is devastated. The family is talking. I hope you are satisfied." I did not reply. On Saturday morning, I opened my banking app and found the recurring transfer, $2,100 every month to Richard and Angela Parker. I canceled it. Then I opened a new recurring transfer, $600 a month into an education savings account. No child yet, no name attached, just a decision to put the money somewhere it could grow instead of disappear. 3 weeks after the wedding, my father called. I was making pancakes while Ethan read at the kitchen table. I let it ring 3 times. "Natalie," he said. His voice was smaller, not the store voice, not the reception voice. "People are calling about the money." "I know. What are you telling them?" "Nothing. I haven't called anyone. I haven't posted anything. They are talking about what they saw." He breathed into the phone. "What do you want from me?" I had thought about that on drives, in showers, at my desk, and in the quiet seconds before sleep. "I want you to stop keeping score. I want you to look at me and see your daughter, not a return on investment. And the monthly transfer is over. It was help. It was never repayment. It was never acknowledged, so it is done." "Your grandfather always said." "He was wrong," I said, not harshly, just clearly. "Walter was wrong." My father said nothing for a long time, then he hung up. 5 months later, Ethan and I bought a small house in Grayfield. 3 bedrooms, a porch, a backyard, and a garage that could actually hold a car. I was promoted to senior manager. Ethan finished a bridge project ahead of schedule. We planted tomatoes and adopted a gray cat Ethan named Ledger because apparently marriage includes tolerating crimes against humor. I stopped calling my parents. I called Aunt Susan instead. She told me Briar Falls news without turning it into strategy. In April, Lauren texted. Got a full-time job. She had been hired at the county record's office. Benefits. Regular hours. A paycheck with her own name on it. I answered, proud of you. She did not reply. In May, my mother left a voicemail while I was in a meeting. I listened in the parking lot afterward. "Natalie, it's Mom. I was wrong about a lot. I don't expect you to call me back. I just needed to say it." I saved the voicemail. I did not call back that day. My father has not called again. The store is still open. Nobody asks me for money now. The spreadsheet is still on my laptop, but I have not opened it in months. The last line remains the same, transfer canceled. Account closed.